The morning sun was just beginning to rise over Miller's Woods when Sarah Chen tied her running shoes. She had been doing this morning jog for the past 3 years, but today would be different. Today would change not only her life but also the life of a creature who had lost all hope. Sarah worked as a computer programmer during the day, but her real passion was helping animals. Every weekend, she volunteered at Hope Animal Rescue, where she helped take care of abandoned dogs and cats. She knew all about animals in trouble, but nothing could have prepared her for what she would find that morning. The air was cool and fresh as Sarah jogged along her usual path. Birds were singing their morning songs, and the leaves rustled gently in the breeze. Everything seemed normal until she reached the old oak tree near Parker's Creek. That's when she heard it, a sound that made her blood run cold. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but then she heard it again, a weak whimper, barely louder than a whisper, coming from somewhere deeper in the woods. Sarah stopped running and pulled out her earphones. Years of working with rescue animals had taught her to trust her instincts. "Hello," she called out, stepping off the main trail. The whimper came again, a bit clearer this way. Sarah's heart started beating faster. Something wasn't right. She pushed through some bushes, her running pants getting caught on thorns, but she didn't care. The sound was getting louder. Then she saw something that made her gasp, a shape hanging from a low branch about 50 feet ahead. Sarah ran forward, her hands shaking as she pulled out her phone and turned on its flashlight. What she saw next would haunt her for years to come. There, tied to the branch with crude rope, was a young German Shepherd mix. The dog's paws barely touched the ground, and its body was thin, so thin she could count every rib. "Oh my God, oh my God," Sarah whispered, trying to stay calm even as tears filled her eyes. The dog's fur was matted and dirty, and there were ugly wounds around its neck where the rope had cut in. But what struck Sarah most were the dog's eyes. Big, brown eyes that looked right at her with a mix of fear and something that seemed like hope. Sarah quickly called Mark, the head of Hope Animal Rescue. "Mark, I need help right now," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm in Miller's Woods, near Parker's Creek. Someone tied up a dog. It's bad, Mark. Really bad." While waiting for help, Sarah talked softly to the dog. She didn't dare try to untie it alone. The poor thing might be hurt worse if it fell wrong. Instead, she stood close, letting it know it wasn't alone anymore. "It's okay, sweetie," she said gently, using the calm voice she had learned at the rescue center. "Help is coming. You're going to be okay now." The dog's tail moved slightly, just a tiny wag, but it was enough to bring fresh tears to Sarah's eyes. Even after everything humans had done to it, this brave soul still wanted to trust. Sarah heard voices calling her name about 15 minutes later. Mark had arrived with 2 other volunteers in their rescue van. They had brought wire cutters, a stretcher, and emergency medical supplies. "Dear Lord," Mark whispered when he saw the dog. In his 20 years of animal rescue, he had seen many terrible things, but this was different. They worked carefully, with Sarah supporting the dog's body while Mark cut the ropes. The dog didn't struggle or bite. It was too weak, too tired. When they finally got it down, they saw it was a male dog, probably around 2 years old. As they gently placed him on the stretcher, Sarah noticed something else. Despite everything, the dog kept his eyes on her. Not with fear anymore, but with something else. Something that made Sarah promise herself right then and there that she would see this through, no matter what it took. None of them knew it yet, but this was just the beginning of an amazing journey. A journey that would start with this terrible morning, but would lead to something beautiful. A story that would touch hearts, change lives, and remind everyone about the power of kindness and hope. Getting the injured German Shepherd into the rescue van wasn't easy. Sarah and Mark had to move very carefully. One wrong move could hurt the dog even more. The morning air was getting warmer now, and Sarah could see just how bad things were in the bright sunlight. "We need to put him on the stretcher," Mark said, pulling out a blue animal rescue stretcher from the van. "Sarah, keep talking to him. He seems to trust your voice." Sarah knelt beside the dog, her voice soft and steady, even though her hands were shaking. "Hey there, brave boy. We're going to move you now, okay? You're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." The dog's eyes never left Sarah's face. He was so weak he could barely lift his head, but something in those brown eyes told Sarah he understood they were trying to help. Tom and Lisa, the other volunteers, helped Mark position the stretcher while Sarah kept the dog calm. Ready? Mark asked. On three. 1, 2, 3. They lifted together, trying to keep the stretcher as level as possible. The dog made a small whimpering sound that broke Sarah's heart, but he didn't struggle. Maybe he knew this was his chance to live, or maybe he was just too weak to fight. Either way, they got him safely onto the stretcher. Lisa, call Valley Emergency Vet Hospital, Mark ordered as they secured the straps. Tell them we're coming with a critical case. Tom, you drive. Sarah, you stay in the back with him. I'll follow in my car. The inside of the rescue van was cramped but clean. They had blankets, water, and a first aid kit, but Sarah knew they couldn't do much until they reached the hospital. She sat on the floor next to the stretcher, one hand gently resting near the dog's nose so he could smell her. As Tom started driving, Sarah got her first real chance to look at their rescue. The dog's brown and black fur was dirty and matted with mud and leaves. He was terribly thin. Sarah had never seen a dog's ribs stick out so badly. There were cuts and sores all over his body, and the skin around his neck was raw and bleeding where the rope had been. What kind of person could do this? She whispered, carefully using a small cloth to wipe some dirt from the dog's face. The dog blinked slowly at her, and his tail moved just a tiny bit, the same brave little wag she'd seen in the woods. The drive to the hospital took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours to Sarah. Every bump in the road made the dog whimper, and all she could do was talk to him, promising over and over that everything would be okay. She told him about the rescue center, about the nice warm beds they had for dogs, about the big yard where healthy dogs could play. She wasn't sure if he understood the words, but her calm voice seemed to help. His breathing became a little steadier, and sometimes he would lift his head just a bit to look at her. You know what? She said softly. You need a name. We can't just keep calling you boy or dog. How about Phoenix? Because you're going to rise up from this, just like the phoenix in the stories. The dog's tail wagged again, a bit stronger this time, and Sarah smiled through her tears. Phoenix it is, then. When they finally reached Valley Emergency Vet Hospital, things happened very quickly. Dr. Martinez and her team were waiting outside with a proper medical stretcher. They helped move Phoenix carefully from the rescue stretcher, asking Sarah and Mark quick questions about where they found him and what condition he was in. BP is low, one of the nurses called out as they rushed Phoenix through the hospital doors. Temperature below normal. We need warming blankets and IV fluid stat. Sarah tried to follow, but Dr. Martinez stopped her gently. We'll take good care of him, she promised. But right now, we need space to work. Do you have forms from the rescue center? We'll need them filled out. As Sarah watched Phoenix disappear behind the emergency room doors, she felt both worried and hopeful. Worried because he was in such bad shape, but hopeful because he was finally getting help. She noticed his last look before the doors closed. Somehow, even on the hospital stretcher, he had managed to turn his head to find her with his eyes. Fight, Phoenix, she whispered. Just fight. We'll all be here for you when you wake up. The waiting room at Valley Emergency Vet Hospital felt too quiet. Sarah sat in an uncomfortable plastic chair, staring at the clock on the wall. It had been 2 hours since they brought Phoenix in, and every minute felt like an hour. Mark had gone back to the rescue center to file reports, but he made Sarah promise to call him the moment she heard anything. The emergency room doors opened, and Sarah jumped to her feet. But it was just another family leaving with their cat. She slowly sat back down, her hands twisting the strap of her bag. She was still wearing her running clothes from the morning, still had dirt on her knees from kneeling beside Phoenix in the woods. None of that mattered now. Finally, Dr. Martinez came out. The doctor looked tired, and there were spots of blood on her blue scrubs. Sarah's heart seemed to stop for a moment, but then she saw the doctor give a small smile. He's stable, Dr. Martinez said, sitting down next to Sarah. But I won't lie to you. It's very serious. Would you like to know everything? Sarah nodded. She needed to know what Phoenix had been through, even if it was hard to hear. The good news is, no broken bones, the doctor began, opening her notebook. But he's severely dehydrated and malnourished. He weighs only 40 pounds. A healthy German shepherd, mix his size, should weigh at least 70. The wounds around his neck are infected, and he has several other infections from untreated cuts and sores. Sarah felt tears coming to her eyes again, but she blinked them back. What about internal injuries? His organs are stressed from the malnutrition, but they're working. We've started him on IV fluids and antibiotics. The next 24 hours will be critical. Dr. Martinez paused, then added, "There's something else you should know. We found old fractures that healed badly, his front left leg and 2 ribs. This wasn't a one-time thing. This dog has suffered abuse for months." Sarah felt sick to her stomach. She thought about Phoenix's gentle eyes, how he still tried to wag his tail despite everything. How could anyone hurt him like that? "Can I see him?" she asked. Dr. Martinez nodded. "Briefly, he's heavily sedated, but I think it would be good for him to know someone's here. Follow me." They walked through the quiet hospital halls to the intensive care unit. The room was filled with the soft beeping of medical machines and the hum of equipment. Phoenix lay on a bed in the corner, hooked up to various monitors. He looked small and fragile under the white hospital blanket. "We had to shave parts of his fur to treat the wounds," Dr. Martinez explained. "And he's on warming blankets to help with his temperature. The IV is giving him fluids and medicine." Sarah approached the bed slowly. Phoenix's eyes were closed, and his breathing was shallow but steady. Without all the mud and matted fur, she could see he was young, probably not more than 2 years old. A tube in his nose helped him breathe, and multiple IV lines ran into his front leg. "Hey, Phoenix," she whispered, carefully touching his paw. "You're doing so good, brave boy." One of the monitors beeped, and Phoenix's tail moved slightly under the blanket. Even sedated, he knew she was there. "That's a good sign," Dr. Martinez said softly. "He's responding to your voice. Would you like to sit with him for a while?" Sarah nodded gratefully. A nurse brought her a chair, and she settled in beside Phoenix's bed. Dr. Martinez explained what all the machines were for and what numbers they wanted to see going up or down. "I've seen a lot of rescue cases," Dr. Martinez said as she checked Phoenix's vital signs one more time, "but there's something special about this one. Most dogs who've been through what he has wouldn't trust humans at all. But he does, especially you." Sarah stayed there all day, leaving only when the nurses needed to change bandages or give medications. She called Mark with updates and texted her boss that she needed an emergency day off. Nothing else mattered right now. As the sun began to set outside the hospital windows, Sarah watched Phoenix's chest rise and fall with each breath. The numbers on his monitors were slowly improving. His body was fighting, just like she'd asked him to. "You know what, Phoenix?" she said quietly, holding his paw. "You're teaching us all something about second chances. And I promise you, your second chance is going to be amazing." The first week after Phoenix's rescue was like riding a roller coaster. Some days brought good news, others brought setbacks that made everyone worry. Dr. Martinez said this was normal for severe cases, but that didn't make it any easier for Sarah and the rescue team to watch. On Monday, Phoenix's fever finally broke. The antibiotics were working against the infections, and his blood tests showed improvement. Sarah was there when he first lifted his head on his own, looking around the hospital room with more awareness in his eyes. "Look who's feeling a bit better," Dr. Martinez said that morning, checking Phoenix's vital signs. "His appetite is improving too. We might be able to try some soft food today instead of just IV nutrition." But Tuesday brought a scary setback. Phoenix's temperature suddenly spiked again, and he started having trouble breathing. The medical team worked quickly, giving him extra oxygen and stronger medicines. Sarah spent that whole night in the hospital, watching his chest rise and fall, counting each breath. "Come on, Phoenix," she whispered in the quiet hospital room. "You've come too far to give up now." By Wednesday morning, Phoenix was stable again. Dr. Martinez explained that his body was still very weak, and fighting infections took a lot of energy. But there was good news too. His wounds were starting to heal, and he was responding well to gentle touch therapy. The emergency animal hospital had a special program where trained volunteers would sit with sick animals, carefully petting them and talking to them. Touch therapy helped scared and hurt animals feel safe again. Sarah joined this program, learning the right ways to touch Phoenix without hurting his healing wounds. "See these spots on his chart?" One of the nurses, Jenny, showed Sarah. "These are safe zones where you can pet him. And look, he's starting to lean into the touch. That's a very good sign." On Thursday, Phoenix ate real food for the first time since his rescue. It was just a small amount of soft, special dog food, but everyone celebrated like it was a feast. His tail wagged when Sarah fed him tiny spoonfuls, and he licked her hand afterward, his first show of affection. "He's a fighter," Jenny said, smiling as she changed Phoenix's bandages. "Some dogs give up after going through what he did, but not this one. He wants to live." Friday brought another challenge. Phoenix needed surgery to clean some of his deeper wounds. Sarah paced the waiting room during the 2-hour procedure, jumping every time the door opened. But when Dr. Martinez came out, she was smiling. "The surgery went perfectly," she said. "And we found something interesting. He has a tiny microchip. It's old and wasn't registered properly, but it tells us he's about 2.5 years old. He wasn't always a stray." This news made Sarah both sad and angry. Someone had cared enough to get Phoenix chipped as a puppy, but somehow he had ended up abandoned and abused. She promised herself she would find out what happened to him. The weekend brought steady improvement. Phoenix started physical therapy, learning to walk again without pain. His legs were weak from hanging in the ropes, but each day he got a little stronger. The hospital staff made a chart of his daily achievements. Saturday morning, stood up on his own for 1 minute. Saturday afternoon, walked 3 steps with support. Sunday morning, wagged tail for 10 seconds straight. Sunday evening, barked for the first time, a tiny woof that made everyone laugh with joy. "You know what's amazing?" Dr. Martinez said to Sarah on Sunday night. "Look at his eyes now compared to when you brought him in. There's life in them again, hope." Sarah looked at Phoenix, who was resting on his bed but watching everything happening in the room. His eyes were bright and alert now, following the movements of doctors and nurses. When Sarah sat beside him, he lifted his head to rest it on her lap, something he had just started doing. "The nightmare is over, boy," she told him softly, gently stroking his healing ears. "From now on, you only need to focus on getting better." Phoenix's tail thumped against the bed, and he made a small sighing sound of contentment. The road ahead was still long, but his fighting spirit was growing stronger every day. And he wasn't fighting alone. He had a whole team of people in his corner, cheering for every small victory. As days turned into weeks, Phoenix's body grew stronger, but healing his mind would take more time. The emergency phase was over, and he had moved from the hospital to Hope Animal Rescue's Special Recovery Center. Here, traumatized dogs could heal in a quiet, peaceful environment. Sarah visited every day after work, always bringing something new to help Phoenix feel better. Sometimes it was a soft toy, other times a special treat approved by Dr. Martinez. But what Phoenix seemed to love most was when Sarah brought books and read to him. "Dogs don't understand the words," Mark explained to other volunteers, "but they understand the feeling of being cared for. When Sarah reads to Phoenix, he knows he's safe." Phoenix had a special room at the recovery center, painted in calm blue colors with a big window that looked out onto a small garden. His bed was thick and comfortable, much different from his days on the streets. At first, he would only sleep if Sarah was in the room, but slowly he started to trust other people too. Jenny, the nurse from the hospital, visited often to check his healing wounds. "Remember how scared he was of the medical supplies?" she asked Sarah one day. "Now look at him. He knows we're helping." It was true. Phoenix no longer trembled when someone approached with bandages or medicine. He would lie still, his brown eyes watching calmly, sometimes even wagging his tail when the checkup was done. His fur was growing back where they had shaved it for surgery, and he was gaining weight steadily. But some fears were harder to overcome. Loud noises still made Phoenix shake and hide in the corner of his room. The sight of ropes or leashes would make him freeze in terror, and sometimes, late at night, he would wake up whimpering from bad dreams. Sarah worked with Phoenix every day on these fears. She brought a special training leash that was soft and light blue, very different from the rough ropes that had hurt him. At first, she just left it in his room, letting him see it wasn't going to hurt him. "Take all the time you need," she would tell him, sitting on the floor nearby. "No one's going to rush you here." Little by little, Phoenix got braver. One morning, he surprised everyone by picking up the blue leash in his mouth and bringing it to Sarah. His tail was between his legs, and he was nervous, but he had chosen to face his fear. "That's my brave boy," Sarah said softly, giving him his favorite treat. Everyone in the room had tears in their eyes. The recovery center had a special garden where healing dogs could exercise safely. At first, Phoenix would only take a few steps outside before wanting to go back to his room, but as spring arrived, bringing warm sunshine and gentle breezes. He started to enjoy the outdoors more. Sarah would sit in the garden with him, watching as he learned to play again. He discovered he loved chasing butterflies, though he never tried to catch them. He would just follow them with his nose, his tail wagging gently, discovering joy in simple things. Other dogs at the center helped Phoenix too. There was a gentle old golden retriever named Max who seemed to understand what Phoenix had been through. Max would lie quietly nearby, showing Phoenix that it was okay to relax in the garden, okay to trust the people who brought food and toys. One sunny afternoon, something amazing happened. Sarah was reading to Phoenix in the garden when a squirrel ran past. In the past, sudden movements had scared Phoenix, but this time he stood up, wagged his tail, and gave a playful bark. It wasn't the scared bark of a hurt animal, but the happy sound of a dog remembering how to be a dog again. "Did you see that?" Sarah asked Mark, who was watching from the doorway. "He played? He actually played." Mark smiled, wiping away a tear. "That's what healing looks like," he said. "Not just the body, but the spirit too." That evening, as Sarah got ready to leave, Phoenix did something new. Instead of looking sad when she headed for the door, he walked with her, tail wagging gently. At the door, he gave her hand a little lick, as if to say, "It's okay, I know you'll come back tomorrow." Sarah knelt down and hugged him gently. "You're not just healing," she whispered. "You're teaching all of us about courage and trust. Sweet dreams, Phoenix. Tomorrow is another day to be brave." 3 months after his rescue, Phoenix looked like a completely different dog. His coat had grown back thick and shiny, with beautiful patterns of brown and black. His body was strong and healthy now, and his eyes sparkled with life. But the biggest change was in how he acted around people and other dogs. Mark could hardly believe this was the same dog they had found in the woods. "Remember how he couldn't even stand up?" he said to Sarah one morning. "Now look at him." Phoenix was in the rescue center's yard, playing fetch with a tennis ball. His favorite game was when Sarah would throw the ball, and he would bring it back, dropping it gently at her feet. Each time she threw it, he would run faster, his tail wagging with pure joy. "He's ready for the next step," Mark said, watching Phoenix play. "I think it's time to share his story." The rescue center had a social media page where they posted about their dogs. They were careful about what they shared, never showing sad or scary pictures. Instead, they wanted to show how love and care could change an animal's life. Sarah helped take pictures of Phoenix for the post. In one photo, he was sitting proudly in the garden, his head held high. In another, he was playing with his friend Max, both dogs smiling in their own dog way. The last picture showed Phoenix giving Sarah a gentle kiss on her cheek. They wrote Phoenix's story carefully, telling people about his rescue and recovery. They didn't focus on the sad parts, but on how brave he had been, how he had learned to trust again, and how he now helped other scared dogs at the center feel safe. The response was amazing. Within hours, thousands of people had shared Phoenix's story. Comments poured in from all over the world. This made me cry happy tears. "Phoenix, you're such a brave boy. Thank you to everyone who helped save him." Local TV stations called the rescue center, wanting to do stories about Phoenix. Reporters came with cameras, and at first, Phoenix was nervous about all the attention. But Sarah stayed close to him, and soon he was showing everyone how well he could sit, shake hands, and even do a little dance for treats. "He's a natural star," one reporter said, laughing as Phoenix posed perfectly for the camera. The best part was how Phoenix's story helped other animals. People started calling the rescue center, wanting to adopt dogs and cats. They'd also donated money, food, and supplies. Some even volunteered to help, just like Sarah did. Phoenix seemed to know he was helping others. When new scared dogs came to the center, he would approach them slowly, showing them it was safe. He was especially gentle with the ones who had been hurt like he had. There was one small dog named Daisy who wouldn't come out of her corner for days. Phoenix sat quietly near her, not too close, just being calm and friendly. After a while, Daisy started copying what Phoenix did. If he drank water, she would drink too. If he lay in the sun, she would find a sunny spot nearby. "He's become a teacher," Jenny said when she visited from the hospital. "He shows other dogs that it's possible to be happy again." Phoenix had also learned many new skills. He could now walk perfectly on his light blue leash, sit and stay when asked, and even learn some tricks. His favorite was high five. He would gently tap his paw against someone's hand, making everyone smile. But the most beautiful thing was how he greeted each new day. Every morning, when Sarah arrived at the center, Phoenix would be waiting by the door, tail wagging, ready for whatever adventures the day might bring. His eyes no longer held any fear, only love and trust. "You know what the best transformation is?" Sarah asked Mark one evening, as they watched Phoenix playing with some new rescue dogs. "It's not just how he looks on the outside, it's how he's changed inside. He's not just surviving anymore, he's truly living." Mark nodded, smiling as Phoenix ran past with a toy in his mouth, leading a parade of happy dogs. "And he's showing everyone else how to live too. That's the real miracle." Phoenix stopped his game for a moment, looking back at Sarah and Mark with his head tilted, as if to say, "Are you coming to play too?" His whole body wiggled with happiness, showing everyone who met him that no matter how hard life had been, joy could always be found again. While Phoenix was healing at the rescue center, Officer Maria Rodriguez from the local police department's Animal Crimes Unit hadn't forgotten about his case. She kept the rope that had been used to tie Phoenix to the tree in an evidence bag, along with pictures from the day he was found. "Someone knows something," she would say, looking at the case file on her desk. "Dogs don't just appear in woods tied to trees. Someone did this, and someone must have seen something." The police had put up posters around Miller's Woods asking for information. They also shared Phoenix's story on their social media pages, but at first, no one came forward. It seemed like the case might go unsolved, like many animal abuse cases did. But then something interesting happened. A young boy named Tommy, who lived near the woods, was watching the news with his mother when Phoenix's story came on TV. He recognized the area where Phoenix had been found. "Mom," Tommy said, his voice shaking a little, "I think I saw that dog before. The mean man who lives in the blue house on Oak Street used to have a dog that looked just like that." Tommy's mother called the police right away. Officer Rodriguez came to their house to talk to Tommy, bringing pictures of different dogs to make sure Tommy was remembering correctly. The dog had the same brown spots over his eyes, Tommy said, pointing to Phoenix's picture. "I used to see the man yelling at him and keeping him in a small cage in the backyard. Then one day, the dog was gone." This was the lead Officer Rodriguez had been waiting for. She knew the blue house Tommy was talking about. It belonged to a man named Frank Wilson. The police had received complaints about him before, but never had enough evidence to do anything. Officer Rodriguez and her team started watching Frank Wilson's house. They talked to his neighbors, who told stories about hearing a dog crying at night. One neighbor even had security camera footage showing Frank's backyard, where they could see a dog that looked like Phoenix being kept in terrible conditions. "We got him," Officer Rodriguez said when she saw the footage, but they needed to be careful and follow all the proper legal steps. They got a search warrant to look through Frank's house and yard. In Frank's backyard, they found the small cage Tommy had talked about. There were pieces of fur that matched Phoenix's color. They'd also found the same kind of rope that had been used to tie Phoenix to the tree. But the most important evidence came from Phoenix himself. Remember the microchip that Dr. Martinez had found? Even though it wasn't registered properly, it had a serial number. The police traced this number to a pet store where Frank Wilson had bought the puppy 2 years ago. "The store keeps records of all microchip sales," Officer Rodriguez explained to Sarah when she came to the rescue center. "We found the receipt with Frank's signature. That proves Phoenix was his dog." With all this evidence, the police arrested Frank Wilson. When they showed him the pictures and evidence, he finally admitted what he had done. He told them how he had gotten tired of taking care of Phoenix and, instead of bringing him to a shelter, had done the terrible thing in the woods. The news of the arrest spread quickly. People who had been following Phoenix's story were happy that justice was being served. Frank Wilson would face serious charges for animal cruelty, and his case would help make laws against animal abuse stronger. "This is why we never give up," Officer Rodriguez told her team. "Every animal deserves justice, and every abuser needs to learn there are consequences." Sarah cried when she heard the news, but they were tears of relief. She went straight to the rescue center to tell Phoenix, even though she knew he couldn't understand the words. "The bad man can't hurt you or any other animal ever again," she said, hugging Phoenix gently. "You're safe forever now." Phoenix looked at her with his wise, kind eyes and wagged his tail. He didn't understand about police investigations or arrests, but he understood love and safety. That evening, he played in the rescue center yard with more energy than ever, as if he knew a dark chapter in his life was finally closed. You know what's amazing? Mark said, watching Phoenix run and play. His story is going to help protect other animals. Because of him, police and judges are taking animal abuse more seriously. Officer Rodriguez still keeps Phoenix's picture on her desk. Some cases change you, she says. This one reminded us all that every animal deserves a voice, and it's our job to speak for them. 6 months had passed since that cold morning when Sarah found Phoenix in Miller's woods. It was now a warm summer day, and Sarah sat in her living room, watching Phoenix sleep peacefully on his new bed. After much thought and discussion with the rescue center team, she had made the decision everyone somehow knew was coming. She adopted Phoenix. Some dogs choose their humans, Mark had said on adoption day, smiling as he handed Sarah the official papers. Phoenix chose you the moment you found him. Moving Phoenix to his forever home was a big step. Sarah had spent weeks getting her house ready. She bought soft beds for every room, got special toys that helped nervous dogs feel safe, and even installed a doggy door so Phoenix could go into the backyard whenever he wanted. The rescue center team helped with the transition. They advised Sarah about keeping Phoenix's routine similar at first, then slowly introducing new things. Phoenix adjusted better than anyone expected. It was as if he knew this was where he belonged all along. Remember how scared he used to be of doorways? Jenny asked when she visited them. Now look at him, running in and out of his doggy door like he owns the place. But the most amazing part of Phoenix's new life wasn't just how happy he was, it was how he helped others. Sarah had enrolled him in a special therapy dog training program. The trainers were amazed by his gentle nature and his ability to sense when someone was sad or scared. He's a natural, said Lisa, the therapy dog trainer. It's like he knows exactly what each person needs. After completing his training, Phoenix started visiting hospitals and schools. Children who were sick or struggling would light up when they saw him. He would lay his head gently on their beds or sit quietly while they read to him, just like Sarah used to do during his recovery. At one hospital, there was a little girl named Maria who hadn't spoken since a car accident 3 months earlier. When Phoenix came to visit, he did something special. He brought her his favorite toy, a soft blue bear, and placed it in her lap. Bear, Maria whispered, touching Phoenix's head. It was her first word since the accident. Her parents and doctors cried with joy. Phoenix also helped at the rescue center. Every weekend, Sarah would bring him back to visit. New rescue dogs would see him, strong, happy, and loving, and somehow know that they could heal too. His presence gave them hope. The local community embraced Phoenix's story. Schools invited him and Sarah to talk about animal kindness. Police used his case to teach about reporting animal abuse. Even the mayor gave Phoenix a special award for being an ambassador of hope for the city. But the best moments were the quiet ones at home. Every morning, Phoenix would wake Sarah up with a gentle paw on her arm, ready for their walk. They would go to the park, where Phoenix now had many dog friends. He especially loved playing with a puppy named Luna, showing her all of his favorite games. In the evenings, they would sit in the backyard garden Sarah had planted. Phoenix had his own special spot under a tree, where he would watch butterflies and birds. Sometimes, he would look up at the sky with such a peaceful expression that Sarah knew he had completely forgotten his painful past. You've taught us all so much, Sarah would tell them, sitting beside him in the garden. About forgiveness, about healing, about love. Phoenix's story spread far beyond their city. People from around the world wrote letters and sent gifts, but the best gift was how his story inspired others to help animals in need. Many people who read about Phoenix went to their local shelters to adopt dogs and cats. Others started volunteering or donating to animal rescue organizations. 1 year after his rescue, Sarah organized a special celebration at the park. All the people who had helped Phoenix came: Dr. Martinez, Officer Rodriguez, Mark, and the rescue team, Jenny, and even Tommy, the brave boy who had helped solve the case. They brought their own pets, and the park was filled with happy barks and wagging tails. As Sarah watched Phoenix playing with all his friends, both human and animal, she remembered that terrible morning in the woods. The scared, hurt dog she had found that day was gone forever, replaced by this wonderful, loving being who brought joy to everyone he met. Every ending can be a new beginning, she said to Mark, who was taking pictures of the celebration. Phoenix taught us that. Phoenix ran over to them, his tail wagging, carrying his favorite blue ball. His eyes sparkled with happiness and love, showing everyone that no matter how dark things might seem, there was always hope for a brighter tomorrow.